guests today. Li Junfeng, he is the Director General of Climate Change Strategy of the National Development and Reform Commission. As many of you know, that is China's top economic planning agency. He's also the president of the Chinese Renewable Energy Industries Association, sometimes called the father of China's rise in solar and wind energy. Changhua is the Greater China Director for the Climate Group and an expert particularly on carbon markets, a very influential voice on that subject in China. Finally, we have KK Chan, the founder and CEO of Nature Elements Capital, one of the best known private equity companies investing in China's renewable sector. Please have a seat. Mr. Li, why don't I start with you if I could. Right now, China has already announced a plan to gradually ratchet down how much it will pay for solar energy and wind energy going into the grid. Is this a sign of any loss of interest in renewable energy or cost-saving measure, or is it rather a case of China trying to force solar and wind energy companies to continue improving ever more their cost competitiveness and efficiency?
Yes, that's true. The Chinese government is kind of a very ambitious target for renewable energy development, include wind and solar. For this kind of policy pushing, they call it surcharge. Every person, when you purchase electricity, you need to pay 1.5 yuan per kilowatt hours to cover the additional cost of solar and wind. However, the government also tried to enforce the companies to gradually reduce wind and solar, the kind of cost. They have a target now, they're already to listen to all the companies. And in about every 1 year, like solar, to reduce the 1 yuan per year. That means maybe like 2% per annual. The wind is a little bit higher, maybe 3 to 5% per annual, like that, to push them to gradually to reduce the cost of wind and solar in order to develop more wind and solar. Now, in the 13th five-year plan, Chinese government have a target for wind and solar with very big, it can increasing compared with the former target, like solar PV. Usually they want to have like 50 gigawatt by 2020. Now they want to be 150 or 200 gigawatt for solar. For wind, currently they have 200 gigawatt, but now people want to have like a 250 gigawatt in order to more the kind of renewable for power.
Those are impressive numbers. I guess one of the factors that China's looking to try to promote the embrace of these forms of renewable energy is also to make people aware of how much carbon they're emitting. Ms. Wu, I know that China has already started 7 experiments at the provincial or municipal level in different parts of the country to set up carbon markets, and will come up with a national carbon market in 2017. What has worked well so far in these 7 experiments, and what has not worked?
Thank you. China started 2010 to explore, set up the piloting schemes of carbon trading. So we learned literally copied actually the EU ETS. So EU actually spent so much time and effort and also financial resources to build up a capacity in China at the subnational level, because China was not used to the market-based instrument. So it's a huge learning process. So I probably would put learning and capacity building as the 2 most significant actually achievements so far. And out of this 7, so we have 5 cities and 2 provinces, and they all actually, one after another, to become online in the last couple of years. If you look at the trading activities so far, I often say actually, I think you do not need to pay too much attention to the price of carbon traded in which particular day, because that's not where, today it's really correctly reflecting the carbon markets at this moment, partly because the policy context at national level as well as at a local level, they're sort of evolving. They're not totally there yet, but it's more like the exercise itself, build up a capacity, build up infrastructure. That's where it has done a huge deal, actually. So we all need to recognize that sort of contribution. And during the exercise process and the part of the debate in the policy landscape, basically saying, what's next? So we had a couple of choices, and in the last couple of years, one, actually, we could add more cities and provinces to the list, basically saying, okay, let's try more, build up more capacities in different regions. Second option is we go sectoral. We focus on some major industrial sectors because of their conditions, whatever. The third, actually, say, let's go to national. And so back in September, when President Xi Jinping was in New York, and he announced to say, we're going to go global. But the global itself, actually, I don't think is totally global. Economy-wide, yes, we're going to set up a national carbon trading platform, but mostly focusing on 5 or 6 major industrial sectors. Why? Because those industrial sectors, including power, including iron and steel, including non-ferrous metals, paper making, probably cement there as well, they have been on the national priority list in terms of energy efficiency, improvement, as well as emission reduction since the 11th five-year plan. So 10 years ago, we started the journey to really address the efficiency and emissions issues actually in major industrial sectors. So today, actually, if you look at the data, the infrastructure, whatever, they are very well ready. So that's part of the commitment to actually going to 2017, and China is going to step up towards the national level carbon trading platform.
Thank you. Mr. Chan, what are the obstacles for Western companies that are looking to invest in the renewable energy sector in China? After all, we've heard a lot from other companies that are talking about trying to make a difference in this area. We've heard about investing in efforts to de-risk. On the other hand, you look at, for example, big insurance companies, they put almost all their money into projects in the European Union where they don't have the currency risk. In China, we have a lot of talk of possibly devaluation. On the other hand, we have the RMB entering the special drawing rights of the IMF. So between the risk of whether foreigners are really welcome and also the currency risk, some of the peculiarities of the Chinese market, how hard is it to get into the Chinese market?
It's very difficult. There are a couple of risks that I think many people are aware of. Firstly, the regulation risk. Most of the renewable energy projects do not have long-term power purchase agreement, which is very unusual in more established market. So the question is, how are you going to protect your investment? It's highly possible that the government may change the rules, may change the tariff during the life of your project. Number 2 is the currency risk, as we just talked about. There are quite a number of tools that one can rely on to mitigate the risk. One of the most prominent ones will be to borrow local currencies so that you could mitigate naturally the amount of risk you are going to face. Operational risk as well. Even the market has been developed for quite a number of years, but yet when you go down to the operational level, it's quite different from what we typically see in the Western world in terms of honoring of contracts, dealing with your staff, dealing with your suppliers, even off-takers, and then the receivables sometimes, even today, could be an issue. So there are quite a lot of risks that we have to face and get around before we put our money into the market. So clearly we need to be cherry picking. We can't just say, let's go there and spend a lot of money. We need to pick up our partners there very carefully and diligently. We need to pick up where the best location we want to be dealing with. Of course, Beijing, Shanghai is too overcrowded. I don't think you can find a place there easily. But there are quite a lot of underdeveloped provinces or cities that one can still go for. For example, in the western part of China, Chongqing, for example, is a good example. Chongqing, Sichuan, and all the Guizhou area alone itself, it represents a big country in terms of population. In terms of pollution, it's very bad over there. So that presents a lot of good opportunities for potential investors from the West who are interested in securing potentially high return. And one thing when we talk about return, we haven't actually factored into the carbon pricing, as Ms. Wu has just talked about. I'm a firm believer that the carbon market will have a big future in China. So what are the things we are doing? We have an embedded value that today we cannot value, but it will translate into money in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Li, coming back to you, there has been a lot of concern here in Paris that COP21 has not yet figured out how to address the financing issue. How do we come up with $100 billion a year starting in 2020? China has a variety of funds: the South-South Fund, the New Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Silk Road Fund. And yet China is reluctant for that to be included in the $100 billion a year over this question of differentiation. What are China's current concerns? Why does China not want to be part of that $100 billion?
That's most important the regulations based on the kind of the convention. China still they recognize themselves as the developing countries. Based on that, the 100 billion they belong to the kind of next one countries. That's the concept. I think that's one of the reasons for that. China, consequently, they can as a complementary to support use the source, the corporation. In other words, I think in my personal thinking, it's $100 million is not the big problem. I think currently the people do not ready to how to spend this money. Do you remember that in 2008, when the financial crisis coming, all the leaders rushed to London. They make a decision, try to save the economy. Then they spend how much money? Do you remember that? It's $1.5 trillion 1 year. So only this 1 year they spend 15 years of the $100 million. That's the money is not a problem. That's the people, the politicians still concerned. It's available for this money and how to spend the money. Also, this money not only come from the government finance budget, also try to use the Clinton Hillary said they try to organize such big money, involved kind of financial from the market, from the business people. Also, in the period of this week, so many business people come, they try to contribute. Yesterday, I talked to one of the millionaires from USA in Bloomberg, used to be your mayor. He said the government is much more behind the business people. The business people is already spend more than $100 million for climate change. For example, all the energy efficiency, renewables. Every year, more than $1 billion already. So that's just how to organize such kind of money. That's very important, not focus on one country. I don't believe that China is already richer than the USA. But China already put they call it 20 million RMB yuan.
20 million, three plus billion US dollars.
Yeah, 30 plus the $1 billion. But USA only the commitment is $3 billion, but not really commercially. It's officially the commitment maybe. So that's the barrier. I think not China. I think we hope in the next 3 or 4 days they can solve the problem.
Okay. Let me ask you a follow-up again, Mr. Li. The National Development and Reform Commission has an administrative power among only a few hundred of you that most Western officials can only dream of in terms of being able to approve large projects. How is it that China seems to have approved another 155 coal-fired power plants at the local level, when China at the same time has very ambitious targets for controlling at a national level how quickly it expands coal-fired power, and at a time when the demand for coal-fired power, this year anyway, doesn't seem to be that strong? How is it that there's so many more coal-fired power plants now authorized?
That should be two things. Number one is the kind of approval of the government. Since the central government released the approval right for coal power plant to the local people, all the local people, they can approve for themselves for power plant. So that means so many new coal power plant to get approval, and also quite a lot new coal-fired power plant to build last year and this year. However, you should recognize another kind of phenomenon is that all the total power generation of coal is reduced. Last year, that's 2014, reduced about 3% compared to 2013. This year, the coal power generation totally reduced more than 7% compared to 2014. It's negative kind of increasing. The comparable is for the kind of hydro, wind, and nuclear. All of them increased quite a lot. Like wind is more than 20% increased. Solar is maybe 50% increased. So the Chinese government now is very clear. They indicate very, very clear the kind of policy instrument, make the kind of clean energy, low carbon energy in the priorities for development. They try to, in the next 5 or 10 years, the new incremental energy demand mainly come from the kind of renewables and other non-fossil fuels. So don't worry about the coal. I think even they can build more coal power plant, but the total power generation through coal is reduced still.
Can I jump in on this? I think a couple of things to add, actually. If you look at China's energy market today, and I try to think about what would be this one word to describe the current situation in English, I think perplexity probably is a better word to describe it. And another way to call it, actually, literally China is a living lab of new energy transition at this moment. So when this is such a dynamic period of time and a huge learning process, you could imagine, say, we've never done this before, and you have to allow mistakes to be made in that process, and we will try to learn through the mistakes, the curves, whatever, and definitely the direction is clear, the vision is clear, the final end is clear, but somehow, between now and then, we're going to travel this journey. We wish everyone should just go directly, very effectively, efficiently to where we want it to be. In reality, probably we will not be able to enjoy that sort of luxury. Rather, you have to go through all the curves, mistakes, whatever. But I feel confident. I think actually, even with the coal-fired power plants, actually, which has been in the news, you could blame, say, it's a failure of the governance in China. In China currently, the governance structure is the national government wanted to decentralize, giving more authority to local governments, but it's a large country. The performance mechanisms, actually, or supervision oversight mechanism is not perfectly in place, so that, short term, you have cases like that, which is really unfortunate. But somehow it's in the news, it's been, on the table to everyone. I think decision makers at the national level start to recognize the importance or the failure inadequacies on their part, and hopefully I believe that's going to be corrected down the road.
Thank you.
From an investment perspective,
Yes.
firstly, let me declare I won't invest into any coal-fired related facilities, but I think coal-fired power generation is a necessary evil. The question is really how to make it better. For example, can it be used as a CHP basis, combined heat and power, where a lot of industrial residential consumers have to use steam and heating? Where are these coming from? You got some source. Obviously, coal is more readily available. Can we burn it more cleaner? We have a lot of good technology manufacturing companies here. They probably can give us good or better solutions. One, just totally eliminating it.
Okay. By the way, we're a little over halfway through our panel. Please don't forget, everyone, if you want to send a question, q@nytimes.com is the way to do so. Why don't I follow up with a question on the efficiency of the renewable energy investments that China has made, and even whether sometimes they end up being subsidized. I'll never forget going to a new solar panel factory in Changhua several years ago. The local government had provided 20 acres in downtown Changhua of premium land for 5% of the normal price. And the company could keep this land and sell it later if it wanted to for apartment buildings. There were 20-story apartment buildings around it, but this 20-acre plot had, for example, a large grove of orange trees to imply that it was a green business. There was a golf driving range even for the staff. There were dormitories and so forth. And one of the big four banks had sent its entire top leadership team from a provincial bank to ask them, please, how can we lend you more money at the lowest possible rate for a large state-owned enterprise, just a 5% interest rate, and then on top of that, the provincial government of Hunan was going to pay 3 of those 5 percentage points. Is the financing of China's renewable energy sector so generous that maybe it encourages inefficiency at times? And second, does that make it harder for Western companies to play a role because there's already so much easy credit available? Why don't I start with you, Mr. Li, and then we'll
That's true. Some of the kind of local government supply a lot of the kind of financial and the land and other support for some of kind of manufacture solar PV, but it is not really successful. I think that you mentioned such a company. I think maybe quite a lot of them are bankrupt already. I think the easy money is not easy to spend. That's my concern. The people is easier coming is easier to spend, then you do not make any progress. As the other kind of story, most of the people they do not use such kind of financing subsidies. They get a very good situation development. And currently, there are 3 largest companies who got quite a lot of the local government support, like Suntech, like LDK, like Yingli. They have bigger financial problems. So the rest of them, I think they're pretty good. Especially those of the company, I think, who is the leader of the manufacturing the PV, not state companies. All of them are kind of international financing companies. Most of them also not only the mistake Chinese local government, also the mistake from the kind of New York, the Wall Street. They give it too much money, too cheap money. They give to them, so they make them make mistake. However, they give a lot of the support to so many people new PV and so many high quality people working in the PV industries, make this industry very compatible in the worldwide. Currently, China supply maybe 60 to 65% of the panels of PV to the world, and with very cheap price. That's one of the reasons Chinese government to modify their target by 2020 from like 50 gigawatt to about 150 or 200 gigawatt. If they do not cheap enough, never has such a big progress.
It is extraordinary that China, just the amount by which you're raising your solar target is more than the entire electricity production of Britain.
Yeah.
So the decisions being made in China dwarf everywhere else. After all, China's more than a quarter of global carbon emissions. We're starting to come down in time, so I'd like to start taking some of our questions from our audience. Why don't I first ask if we might take a question who's come into q@nytimes.com.
Okay. I have a question for Mr. Li. While China's central government makes national policies, the province and the cities are where the rubber hits the road. And the question is, how is the central government incentivizing or aiding provincial governments to not only increase renewable energy efforts, but also reduce reliance on coal? So a concrete example in the question is, what's being done for a province such as Henan, which is a big coal exporter and whose GDP per capita ranks second to last in the country, for it to change to renewables?
Yeah, that's a very difficult situation. This we call an energy transition. Chinese make the energy transition through the kind of 2 driving force. One of that is quite stronger is the climate change. The Chinese government make a commitment by 2030, the kind of around 2030, the emission of CO2 will be go to the peak. Another one is the pollution control. The pollution control is very seriously to the local government. You have to follow it. That means, for example, if you as the mayor of Shanghai, during your as the kind of position, all the kind of air quality should be keep improved. It's not get worse. That means you have to change quite a lot of the energy use from coal from other clean energies. But they give some of the kind of room for development, like the coal-based provinces like Shanxi. They have too much coal. They can use the coal to make more power than before, to deliver the power to other areas like Beijing and Shanghai, use the modern clean energies. Let's make the kind of partnership, different kind of provincial or people. Also, they try to increasing the kind of renewables, those regions, like Shanxi and Inner Mongolia. More wind and more solar, they combine with the coal to supply electricity. That's two reasons. One of that to make more the kind of clean energies, also make to generate more the income for the kind of coal energy-based regions.
Just as a follow-up actually on that, I visited almost every year for 7 years one family of coal miners and kept track of the education of their daughter. What was interesting was her parents had both left school at 2nd grade, were barely literate, had struggled to have enough food, and as in the 70s and 80s, but her father went to work in a coal mine and made enough money that his daughter, I was so impressed the first time she went, here she was in a village about 2 hours drive outside of Xi'an, age 13, and she was doing more advanced algebra than you would find in many American middle schools. Incredible level of progress. And she has since gone on, I've kept track, she's since gone on to go to college and to get a job, with a good job. So when you track that, what is going to become of these hundreds of thousands of coal mining families as China starts to try to move in a different direction? Is there a way to provide for them so that you don't get real setbacks to household incomes in some of these very poor coal mining areas?
I think for the coal miners, the only very few people can make money. I think for the families who the laborers who work in the coal miners, they never could send their daughter, their son to abroad.
Yes.
Only the boss of the coal miners. So I don't think the coal mining is a high income industries. We also quite a lot of argument inside of China. Since China currently that near 70% of the energy from coal. When they reduce the coal, most of the people said, can we do that? Since we have more than 5 million people, there's 5 million workers on the coal field. I said, argue for that. Do we need that kind of a job or not? It's a very risk, very polluted work. Why we need such kind of a job? We have so many jobs. We have so many service sectors and too many. We don't need the kind of the coal miners to supply the kind of job for the people. We don't worry for that. It's so many. I think currently near 100 countries in the world, like France, no workers on coal. In UK, the Great Britain, I mean, there's no workers on coal. They're living very good. Why we rely on the coal for jobs? So that's what needs a big change, make a big debate. Now that most people believe we couldn't one day to change, but we can gradually change.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify, by the way, that young woman went to a local small polytechnic. It's not like she went to an international university, but the point was that she did go to a college, which was extraordinary for somebody growing up in a tiny village. We actually have time to take one question from the floor here, if we could. I
have a gentleman who's come to meet to ask a question.
Here we go. Here we go.
Yes, hello. It's Ingo Stuckman from a Zero Emission Think Tank. I have a question to you in relation to the coal plants that are being built. Have you thought or looked at baseload wind energy? The example we did a study in the United States. When you take 500 miles apart a geographic spread of wind farms from North Dakota to Chicago, you basically get baseload wind energy.
Can you answer the question?
No, I think you're much better positioned.
I think that's a technical issue. So I think do we take the wind at the base load? I think The power system is very complicated. There's so many power resources. You have nuclear, you have coal, you have hydro, you have natural gas, solar. But I think we trust the grid. The grid can make the balance for that. Especially in China, the wind and solar is too small, less than 5% for the power generation. So that's not big the issues. The Europeans, especially like Germany, Denmark, they have more than 40% of the installations the wind. But we don't worry for that, for the technical issues.
Try to avoid the northern part of China where the grid is so weak that it can't sustain for too many wind farms at the same time.
Yes, there's been a big issue there, I guess, on stranded power, but have you been able to reduce the percentage of wind turbines that are unable to be used because of limitations in the grid, or is that still a big problem with the wind energy sector in China?
Yes, that's the argument. I think currently the wind turbines, the numbers is too small yet. I think most people they believe they can double it. It's no problem. So no people to worry. We have too many wind turbines already. Not yet.
Not yet. On that optimistic note, with promises of, for example, adding 100 gigawatts to the target for solar, let's wrap up now the first half of the morning. We have 20 minutes.